Austin is playing Tuvasa the Sunlit, and in his starting hand, he has a Spirit Mantle, Azorius Chancery, Sungrass Prairie, Sun Titan, Holy Avenger, Sphere of Safety, and a Forest. I'm playing Halana Kessig Ranger and Alena Kessig Trapper as partners for my commanders. And in my starting hand, I have Goblin and Necromancer, you have a Maya Dryad, a Mountain, and another Mountain, Druid of Purification, Rockfell Vale, and a Vivian Monsters Advocate. Aaron is playing Mayael the Anima as his commander, and in his starting hand he has a Rampant Growth, Guardian Project, Sacred Foundry, Chord of Calling, Growing Rites of Elamok, a Taiga, and Regal Behemoth. Cody as his commander is playing Ayara, First of Locthwain, and in his starting hand he has a Snow-Covered Swamp, a Swamp, another Snow-Covered Swamp, Orzhov Enforcer, Bloodghast, Hagara Mauling, and a Blood Artist. Austin starts the game by drawing and then playing a Sungrass Prairie and passes the turn to me. I draw and then play a Rockfall Vale that comes into play tapped and pass to Aaron. Aaron draws and then plays a Sacred Foundry which enters tapped and then passes to Cody. Cody draws for turn and then plays a Snow-Covered Swamp and then passes to Austin. Austin draws for turn and then plays an Azorius Chancery as land. This causes him to bounce the Sungrass Prairie back to hand. Bouncing the land back means he has to discard to hand size because he now has 8 cards. He chooses to discard a Holy Avenger and then passes the turn to me. I untap, draw, and play a Mountain as land for turn. Paying 2 mana, I cast Goblin and Archomancer, which will make all my green and red spells cost 1 less colorless mana to cast. With no other plays, I pass the turn to Aaron. Aaron goes through his upkeep, draws, and plays a Taiga as land for turn. Tapping 2 lands, Aaron then casts a Rampant Growth fetching a Forest. Aaron then passes the turn to Cody. Cody goes through his upkeep, draws, and plays a basic Swamp as land for turn. Paying 2, he then casts an Orzhov Enforcer. With no other plays, Cody passes to Austin. Austin untaps and draws. Playing a Forest as land for turn, he then taps the Azorius Chancery for a blue and white, and then taps the Forest to cast his commander Tuvasa the Sunlit. With no other plays, he passes the turn to me. I go through my upkeep and play a Forest for turn. Tapping all my mana, I play Halana and Alena partners for 3 mana due to Goblin and Necromancer discounting their cost by 1 colorless mana. Pre-combat main phase, Halana and Alena partners allows me to give another creature 2 +1/+1 counters and haste. I decide to give these to my Goblin and then move to combat. I decide to swing my Goblin at Aaron because he has no blockers. Aaron then takes 4 damage and goes to 36 life. With no more actions to take, I pass the turn. Aaron untaps and draws. Playing a Mountain as land for turn, he then taps out for a Guardian Project. With no other plays to make, Aaron then passes the turn to Cody. Cody upkeeps and draws. Playing a Swamp, he casts his commander Ayara, First of Locthwain. Due to Ayara's ability, when a black creature enters the battlefield, each opponent loses 1 life and Cody gains 1 life. Ayara sees herself enter, so we all take 1 damage and Cody gains 1. With that, Cody passes the turn to Austin. Austin untaps, draws, and plays a Floodplain as land for turn. It enters tapped, so he can't fetch a land this turn. Then, paying 3, Austin casts an Enchantress's Presence. Because Enchantress's Presence is an enchantment, Tuvasa triggers, allowing Austin to draw a card. With another enchantment on the battlefield, Tuvasa is now a 2/2. Austin then passes the turn to me. I untap and draw, and then play a Mountain as land for turn. Tapping all 4 of my lands, I then cast Ilharg the Raised Boar. In my pre-combat main phase, Halana and Alena partners gives another creature 2 +1/+1 counters and haste, so I give those to Ilharg and it is now an 8/8 with trample and haste. I go to combat and send my goblin at Aaron and my Illarg at Austin, not wanting to lose any creatures to Orzhov Enforcer's Death Touch. Since Halana and Alena partners have first strike, I send that at Cody knowing they will kill the Orzhov Enforcer before Death Touch matters. With Illarg's combat trigger on the stack, I may put a creature into play tapped and attacking from my hand. I choose to put Yavimaya Dryad into play tapped and attacking. When Yavimaya enters the battlefield, it allows me to fetch a forest land. This resolves before blocks are declared, and I grab a Cinderglade and put it into play tapped. Since Yavimaya must attack, I choose to send it at Cody. Aaron with no blocks takes 4 from my goblin and goes to 31 life. Cody trades his Orzhov Enforcer with my Yavimaya Dryad and then takes the 2 damage from Halana and Alena partners. When Orzhov Enforcer dies, it creates a white-black spirit creature token. Ayara sees this and drains everyone for 1 damage, and Cody gains 1 life. Austin, not wanting to block my 8/8 with trample, takes the 8 damage, going to 31 life. After that stompy play, I pass the turn to Aaron. Aaron untaps, draws, and taps out for a Jetmir Nexus of Revels. Guardian Project triggers due to a non-creature token, ETBing, allowing Aaron to draw a card. Aaron then plays a tapped Bala Ged Sanctuary as land for turn. With no other plays, Aaron passes to Cody. Cody untaps, draws, and plays a swamp as land for turn. Tapping 4 mana, he casts a Chittering Witch. Since Chittering Witch is a black creature, Ayara drains each opponent for 1 damage and Cody gains 1 life. When Chittering Witch ETBs, they also create 3 black rat creature tokens, which means each of us is drained for another 3 damage and Cody gains another 3 life for a total of 4. Cody, realizing he can't use his life tokens, puts back his good boys and grabs a paper rat token. He then passes the turn to Austin. Austin draws for turn and cracks his floodplains to fetch a basic island. Then, Austin asks if my Illarg will attack him again on my turn. I make it clear that I'm focused on Cody, knowing that Cody can deal drain damage and gain life. With the politics out of the way, Austin continues his turn and plays Sungrass Prairie. Tapping an Azorius Chancery, he casts Spirit Mantle and attaches it to Tuvasa. Tuvasa gains +1/+1 and protection from creatures. Because Spirit Mantle is an enchantment, this allows him to draw 2 cards due to Tuvasa and Enchantress's presence. Paying 2 mana, Austin casts the best card in Magic, Spirited Companion. On cast, Enchantress's presence triggers again, drawing Austin another card. When Spirited Companion ETBs, it allows him to draw a card. Tapping his last open mana, Austin casts a Soul Ring. Knowing he wouldn't be able to effectively block Cody if he attacked, Austin swings his Tuvasa, which is now a 5/5, at Cody for a total of 5 commander damage. Cody, unable to block due to Tuvasa gaining protection from creatures, takes 5 damage, going to 39. Moving to end step, Austin has 8 cards in hand and has to discard down, so he chooses to get rid of his Imprisoned in the Moon. After that, I start my turn. I untap and draw. I play a mountain and then pay 4 mana to cast Vivien Monster's Advocate. Adding a loyalty counter to Vivien, I create a 3/3 beast creature token and choose for it to have a reach counter. I give my 3/3 token 2 +1/+1 counters and haste with Halana and Alena partners, then move to combat. I attack Cody with my Illarg, and I send my 5/5 beast token at Aaron. Illarg has a combat trigger, which lets me play a creature card from my hand and put it onto the battlefield tapped and attacking. I put a Druid of Purification onto the battlefield tapped and attacking Austin. Druid has an ETB trigger, which allows each player to choose an enchantment or artifact to destroy that is not mine. I choose the Spirit Mantle. Aaron, after making a deal with Austin to protect his Guardian Project from being a target, chooses the Spirit Mantle as well, since I already declared that as a target. Cody selects the Enchantress's presence, and Austin chooses to target the Spirit Mantle as well. Austin takes 2 damage from the Druid of Purification, Aaron takes 5, and Cody takes 8 from my Illarg. With no other plays I want to make, I pass the turn to Aaron. Aaron untaps and draws. He plays a Wooden Foothills as land for turn. He then cracks Wooden Foothills and puts Plateau into play. Tapping Jetmir to help pay the Convoke's ability, along with 3 lands, Aaron pays for a Chord of Calling where X is equal to 1. This means Aaron can search for a creature card with 1 CMC value or less and put it onto the battlefield. He finds a Birds of Paradise and puts it onto the battlefield. This triggers the Guardian Project, so he draws a card. With 3 mana up, Aaron moves to end step. On Aaron's end step, Cody taps Ayara to sacrifice a rat and draw a card. Cody untaps, draws, and pays 2 for a Bloodghast. Ayara sees the Bloodghast enter the battlefield, which drains each opponent for 1 life, and Cody gains a life. Then, tapping Ayara, Cody sacrifices the Bloodghast to draw a card with her ability. He then plays a land for turn. This triggers Bloodghast's landfall ability, allowing it to return to the battlefield, draining us all for 1 damage again. Then, he casts a Lasso Step Reaper. When it enters the battlefield, it amasses 1 black zombie creature token. Ayara sees both creatures and drains everyone for another 2 damage. Moving to combat, Cody swings at Austin with Chittering Witch for 2 damage. Austin decides not to block and takes the 2. With no other plays, Cody passes the turn to Austin. On Austin's upkeep, Cody notices that I forgot to return the Druid of Purification to my hand. Since it was put on the battlefield by Illarg, it is required that it returns to my hand at the beginning of the next end step. So, taking a second, I put the Druid of Purification back into my hand, and Austin resumes his turn. Austin untaps and draws. Knowing that Druid of Purification may hit the battlefield again, he then plays Rancor since it would be returned to his hand if destroyed, and attaches it to Tuvasa. When Rancor is cast, Tuvasa has a card draw trigger. With Rancor attached, Austin's commander is now a 5/3 with Trample. Deciding not to attack, Austin passes the turn to me. I go through my upkeep and draw, and play a mountain as land for turn. I tick down 2 of Vivian's loyalty counters, which allows me to search my library for a creature card with lesser converted mana cost after the next creature spell I cast, and then put that search card onto the battlefield. I cast my commander, Alena Kessig Trapper, and then search my library for Archetype of Aggression, giving all of my creatures trample and making my opponents lose trample for their creatures. Tuvasa no longer has trample from Rancor thanks to my Archetype of Aggression. Moving to combat, I give my commander Alena haste and 2 +1/+1 counters with Halana and Alena partners. I then swing my commander, who is now a 6/5 with First Strike and Trample, my 8/8 Illarg, and my 5/5 Beast Creature token, all at Cody for a total of 19 damage. Illarg has an attack trigger, and I put the Druid of Purification onto the battlefield again, tapped and attacking Cody as well. For Druid's ETB, I select the Guardian Project to be destroyed. Cody chooses Austin's Soul Ring, and Aaron chooses his Guardian Project. Austin also goes with Guardian Project. After Druid resolves, Austin taps 3 mana to Beast Within my Druid. Beast Within resolves, so my Druid is destroyed, and I make a 3/3 Beast Creature token. Moving to declare blockers, Cody decides to block my 5/5 Beast Creature token with his 2 Rat tokens, the Zombie Mask token, the Flying Spirit token, and Lasso Step Reaper, which totals for 5 attack power and 6 creature toughness. I order the block so that all the tokens die and the Lasso Step Reaver lives. Cody then takes 14 damage. After damage happens, Aaron casts Path to Exile, hitting my Archetype of Aggression. It is exiled, and I search my library for a basic land card and put it into play tapped. I choose a forest, and after shuffling, Vivian allows me to peek at the top card of my library. Wondering how much longer I'll have my board state be around, I pass the turn to Aaron. Aaron goes through his upkeep and draws. He plays a mountain as land for turn. Then, tapping Birds of Paradise, he taps an additional 5 mana to play Dragonlord Dramoka. This gives all of his creatures an additional +1 to their attack power, and they gain Vigilance. Aaron then passes the turn to Cody. Cody untaps, upkeeps, and draws. Then, tapping Ayara, he sacrifices Bloodghast to draw a card. Then, tapping a swamp, he casts Kaya's Ghost Form on Ayara. Paying 4 mana, he casts a Marsh Flitter, which creates 2 1/1 Goblin Rogue black creature tokens. Ayara sees all 3 creatures enter and drains each opponent for 3, and Cody gains 3 life. After that, Cody passes the turn. Austin upkeeps, draws, and starts off his turn by playing a Terramorphic Expanse and cracks it right away for an island that comes into play tapped. Then, paying 5 mana, he casts a Sphere of Safety. On cast, Tuvasa triggers, allowing Austin to draw. With no other plays, he then passes the turn to me. I go through my upkeep and draw. Using Vivian's ability, I take a peek at the top card of my library. I tap 5 mana and cast Inferno of the Star Mounts. Then, I use Vivian's +1 ability to make a beast creature token with reach to keep her protected in case anyone tries to attack her with flying creatures. Moving to combat, I give my 2 +1/+1 counters and haste to Inferno so that if I attacked Aaron with my Inferno, Dromoka wouldn't be able to kill it. I send my Inferno of the Star Mounts at Aaron and my Commander and Ilarg at Cody. Since I don't have any more creatures in hand, Ilarg's trigger is skipped. Aaron decides not to block Inferno and takes 8 damage. Cody blocks my Commander with 1 Goblin Rogue token and then puts the other Goblin token, Chittering Witch, and Lasso Step Reaver in front of Ilarg, blocking 4 damage. Because Ilarg has Trample, Cody still takes 4. After those attacks, I pass the turn to Aaron. Aaron untaps and draws. Paying 3 mana, he casts a Growing Rites of Elamok. This allows him to look at the top 4 cards of his library and reveal a creature card from among them and put them into his hand. He reveals a Titan of Industry. Hoping to flip Growing Rites of Elamok, Aaron casts a 3 Visits, fetching up a basic forest. Then, tapping his remaining mana, he casts his commander, Mayael, the Anima. Aaron moves forward to combat and swings Dragonlord Dromoka at me for 6 damage in the air. I block with my 3/3 Beast token that had a reach counter on it. The Beast token dies and Aaron gains 6 life. Aaron passes the turn to Cody, and on Aaron's end step, since he controls 4 creatures, is able to flip Growing Rites of Elamok. Cody goes through his upkeep and draws. He taps Ayara and sacrifices Marsh Flitter to draw a card. Then, tapping 5 mana, he casts a Living Death. An easy way to explain how this card works is that all the creatures from your graveyard go to the battlefield, and the cards from the battlefield go to your graveyard. And this happens for every person at the table, so it's not just Cody that gets to do this. Because Living Death requires creatures on the board to be sacrificed, the only thing that would save them in this case would be to phase out or counter Living Death. All I have in my hand is a Rapid Vigor, which will do nothing to save my board because regeneration only protects from destroy effects. There are no responses from Aaron or Austin, so it resolves. Austin puts Rancor back to his hand when it detaches from Tuvasa. My Ilarg is put 3rd from the top of my library when it dies, and I put my commander into the command zone. Then, my Yavimaya Dryad and the Druid of Purification both have ETB triggers when they re-enter from the graveyard. I get a Stomping Grounds with Yavamaya's ETB, and we each select an enchantment or artifact to destroy with Druid of Purification. With no other targets, we all select Austin's Sphere of Safety. With my ATB settled, we move to resolve Cody's, who had 5 creatures enter the battlefield from the graveyard. Marsh Flitter makes 2 Goblin Rogue creature tokens, Chittering Witch makes 3 Rat tokens, and Lasso Step Reaver amasses 1 Zombie token. Since Ayara had Kaya's Ghost Form enchanted on it, she dies but comes back. Cody can choose the order in which Kaya's Ghost Form and the tokens entering the battlefield resolve. He chooses for Kaya's Ghost Form to resolve first, so that Ayara can see the tokens entering the battlefield and drain us for damage. Ayara will also see herself entering the battlefield. This means each opponent takes 7 damage and Cody gains 7 life. Moving to combat, Bloodghast has haste, due to an opponent having less than 10 life, so Cody sends it at Austin, dealing him another 2 damage. Cody then passes the turn to Austin. Austin goes through his upkeep and draws. He plays a Thriving Isle as land for turn. Then, tapping 6 mana, Austin casts a single combat, making us all choose one creature or planeswalker and sacrifice the rest. Additionally, players can't cast creature or planeswalker spells until the end of Austin's next turn. I choose to keep my Vivien, Monsters Advocate. Cody keeps his commander Ayara, and Aaron has nothing on board, so he chooses nothing. Orzhov Enforcer dies, making a black-white spirit creature token, which Ayara sees, draining us for 1 damage. Austin passes the turn to me. I go through my upkeep, draw, and tap 7 mana to play Zendikar Resurgent. Then I +1 the loyalty counter on Vivien to make a 3/3 beast creature token with reach. Before passing the turn to Aaron, I take a peek at the top card of my library thanks to Vivien. With no other plays, I pass the turn to Aaron. Aaron untaps and draws. He then plays a Plains as land for turn, and since he only has creatures in his hand, he's unable to cast any spells and passes the turn to Cody. Cody untaps and draws. Asking what everyone has in their graveyard, we all brace for the enemy dead. Attempted to grab my Inferno of the Star Mounts, Cody decides to reanimate his Chittering Witch instead. When Chittering Witch ETBs, Ayara will drain everyone for a total of 4 damage thanks to the 3 rat tokens that Chittering Witch creates. Austin goes to 1, I drop to 15, and Aaron is knocked out. Cody attacks with his 1/1 spirit creature token at Austin. Austin, unable to block or have any responses, takes the 1 damage and is also knocked out. After combat, Cody taps Ayara to sacrifice a rat token to draw a card. Then he passes to me. I untap and draw for turn. Thanks to Zendikar Resurgent letting my mana tap for double, I'm able to generate 8 mana, floating a forest to cast my commander Alena. Since I cast a creature, Zendikar triggers and I draw a card. Thanks to Vivien, I'm able to look at the top card of my library and cast creature spells from it. Using 2 lands, I cast my other commander Halana, Kessig Ranger, which lets me draw a card from the Zendikar Resurgent cast trigger. Taking a look at the top card of my library, I decide to cast Domri, Anarch of Bolas. I -2 loyalty counters from Domri and have my commander Halana fight the Chittering Witch. In response, Cody sacrifices a rat token using Chittering Witch's ability to make Halana get a -2/-2 to her attack power and toughness until end of turn. This causes Halana and Chittering Witch to trade, so both die. Chittering Witch goes to the graveyard, and I put my commander back into the command zone. I play a Tyrite Sanctum as land for turn, and make another 3/3 beast creature token with reach. Not sure what else to do, I pass the turn. Cody untaps and draws. Then paying 4 mana, he casts a Sengrin Autocrat. When it enters, he creates 3 0/1 Surf tokens. This drains me for a total of 4 damage, and Cody gains 4 life. I'm now down to 11, and Cody is at 35. Cody, for the sake of going for the win, casts Malakir Rebirth on Sengir Autocrat. As part of the cost for Malakir Rebirth, he loses 2 life. He then sacks Sengir Autocrat to Ayara, draws a card, and then Sengir Autocrat comes back thanks to Malakir Rebirth, draining me for another 4, and he gains another 4 life. Now, at 7 life, I hope to top deck a Miracle. After hitting me for some good drain damage, Cody moves to his end step. On his end step, I pay 2 and tap Tyrite Sanctum to put a +1/+1 counter on my commander, Alena. I go through my upkeep and remove 2 loyalty counters from Vivien, hoping to search my library for an answer. I then tap 3 lands to generate 6 mana and recast Halana. This allows me to draw a card off the Zendikar Resurgent and to find a 3-drop and put it onto the battlefield. I grab a Kalathis God of Destiny and put it onto the battlefield in hopes her pre-combat exile step will give me enough life gain to outlast the drain. Since my devotion to green and red is greater than 7, she comes in as a creature. I draw a card and take a peek at the top card of my library. Tapping 3 lands to create 6 mana, I cast Bane of Progress from the top of my library, trying to dig for more answers. Sadly, this destroys my Zendikar Resurgence, and Cody has no enchantments or artifacts, so Bane will only enter as a 3/3. I then play a land for turn and take a look at the top card of my library. Using Domri, Anarch of Bolas's +1 ability, I create a floating red mana and tap a land to cast an Abrade, choosing to deal 3 damage targeting Ayara. Cody has no responses, and Ayara dies. He returns Ayara to the command zone. I then move to my pre-combat main phase and use Colothus, God of Destiny, to exile Chittering Witch to gain 2 life and make Cody lose 2 life. I go back up to 9 life, and Cody is now at 34. I move to combat and attack with my commander Alena and 2 3/3 beast creature tokens for a total of 11 damage. Cody declares no blocks and goes to 23 life. I then pass the turn to Cody. Cody goes through his upkeep and taps 2 mana for a Blood Artist. He then pays 3 mana for a Meathook Massacre, where X is equal to 1. This kills 6 of his creatures. Blood Artist and Meathook Massacre both see all 6 creatures die. I take a total of 12 damage, and this is a lethal amount, so I die. G heckin' G. I hope you had fun watching, and oh my goodness, was that an intense game. Like, my heart was racing the whole time. Woo! Like, was not expecting that kind of finish, I guess, but, I was digging for answers, hoping I could, swing out and hit face, but I don't know. Cody, good job. Anyways, usually at the end of the game, we like to do like what we thought was like our MVP card and then what was the runner up. We did do stuff where we're like the card that got the mop, so the one that kind of performed poorly, but we kind of decided to stop with that because it feels a little too negative. So now we're just focusing on the positive. So, anyways, the card that we thought was like MVP status was Halana and Alena Partners, because I was able to just, give my creatures haste, put, +1/+1 counters on creatures, making them really big, and just doing a ton of damage really early in the game. So, Alana and Alena Partners, good job. And for runner up, we thought Chittering Witch did quite a bit of work, especially between the rat tokens it was making. It was giving Ayara like tons of sack fodder, but then also the ability to make other creatures weaker by sacrificing a creature and then, adding a -2/-2 to their attack power and toughness was pretty critical for just a defensive play. So those were our top 2 cards. I hope you enjoyed watching, and thank you so much for staying till the end, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.